Just so you know, I too am excited to hear what that verse is all about. I said that to Marsha earlier. She mentioned that to me. That's good. It means we're pulling from some good scriptures if we're getting scriptures that people are like, whoa, I wonder what that's all about. Well, we're going to build upon what we talked about, we started with last week. Last week we learned a very king-sized lesson, and that was about restoration. And the person who really embodied that was a Persian king named King Cyrus. For when you observe King Cyrus's life, you're able to find that he really exhibited that trait, which is something that is so near and dear to God's heart. Restoration, being a restorer. For our God is the restorer of broken things. And what is more broken in this world than us humans, this universe? Not much, to be honest with you. And yet, he finds a way to restore it time after time. A really amazing example of this is actually the Israelites. They got conquered by Babylon, exiled. I mean, for them, their world ended. They probably never thought they would ever be conquered, despite the fact that there are lots of prophets that said, you're going to be conquered unless you repent. Well, they didn't repent, and they got conquered. And yet, God still found a way to restore Israel through a pagan king named King Cyrus, who listened to God himself and made a decree that allowed the Israelites to go back to the promised land, to not just go back, but to be able to rebuild the temple, and to not just be able to rebuild, but King Cyrus said the taxes from that area are going to go to the building, that the treasury of the Persian Empire is going to go to the rebuilding of the Israelite temple. And all the things that King Nebuchadnezzar gutted from the first temple of God, all those are to be restored as well, to be pulled out and sent back to Jerusalem with them. And that is just an incredible thing. And today what we're going to be diving into, the next king-size lesson, is the next Persian king that had a major impact on Israelites' history. And that's King Darius. And we're going to try to find out what king-size lesson that we can learn about God from this king. Now, the name, Darius, for me, actually has a pretty long history. Ironically, not from the Bible. More in the video game sense, the name Darius really, comes to mind. I don't expect any of you guys to know this, but there was a video game called, Darius 2, on Super Nintendo. And I played that game a lot. It was a pretty awesome game. And what I mean by awesome, I mean completely engulf you, lose days of your life, and when you couldn't beat the big bad bosses at the end of every level, you kind of wanted to take your controller and then just kind of nunchuck it right at the TV to kill the boss. I expressed a lot of frustration, thankfully not that far. Very, very, very close. I might have thrown it on the bed. It's just really amazing, this game. It was, I remember particularly this one time, being at my friend Jason Love's house, who was my best friend growing up. And he had this cousin came over. I actually don't remember his name at all, but I remember he was really tall and really good at this game. So he puts it on. It's the first time I ever saw it. And the game went on. I just kind of went. It was just locked in. It was a side-scrolling space shooter. It was amazing. And you had little scenery that showed up that you could crash into. You had all these bad guys that would just come out of everywhere and try to blast you out of the sky. So it was those things that it's like you could kind of go up and down and forward and backwards, but the game kept moving. So you had to really, watch yourself. And he would just play it. He was so good. And I remember just trying to play it. And then, I remember being able to own it and just really, really dedicating and being very faithful to playing this game. I'm pretty sure I beat it at the end. But what's interesting is whenever I beat a video game, you feel happy and satisfied, but then you're just also kind of like, now what? I just really spent a lot of time on that video game. Is my life really that much more improved? Now, obviously, there's always philosophy lessons that you can take from the video games. But my faithfulness in that game, I'm not sure how much it really panned out. And then I remember another game in my life, and this is actually probably my favorite board game. It was called The Great Museum Caper. Again, don't expect any of you to have heard about it. It's actually the characters a clue, but in this time, instead of them trying to solve a murder, they're actually trying to solve a caper that is going on inside of a museum, and they're in the museum, so you have to try to catch the thief. You have to try to catch the burglar. And so one player plays as the caper, person trying to steal paintings, and everyone else plays as the clue character, and you're trying to catch it. Now, the thief is the only one who actually knows where they're located on the board. Everyone else is trying to guess where it is and try to catch the person. And it's an incredibly fun game and lots of strategy. So my parents and my family and I, we first started playing it, obviously the people playing the thief, we didn't do that good, he got caught a lot. Till my dad changed the game. So we played this one game, I swear, for probably 2 hours. It was grueling. And most of the time it felt like he wasn't doing anything. He wasn't trying to steal the paintings or knock out the security cameras and make his life easier, because the goal is to steal as many paintings and get out without being caught. And when the game was finally over and he got a bunch of paintings, we were just like, what did you do? How did you accomplish this? Well, we found out he had a game plan, and he stayed very, very faithful to that game plan. Mostly because you had all these different rooms where the paintings were located. He would just kind of stay in a room and just kind of bug around in there until you got kind of far away, and then he would go and pounce on a painting and go back. And he stayed with that rhythm, and we couldn't figure out what that rhythm was because no one had done that prior to that. So he had a really amazing gameplay, and he stayed with it. And, it just, when I'm looking at all the times I played, games, which has been a lot, I really think about how faithful, how dedicated we can get to these games, to wanting to play them, and we're playing them, we lock it in, right? We're ready to go, we got our game face, on. And isn't it great that no matter how faithful we are to the things that are in life, how much God is so much more faithful to us, no matter the cost. And He doesn't always wait for us to be faithful to Him, for Him to be faithful to us. You want proof? Good. The Bible. It basically is a giant book that demonstrates over and over and over again God's faithfulness to us, and how much we really don't deserve it. And what is awesome is that Israel had to experience this redemption, this restoration, this faithfulness over and over again. Not because God just said, hey, I feel like really being faithful and demonstrating over and over again. It's because Israel kept getting themselves in trouble. And God had to come to the rescue. And the last place that we left the Israelites in the story of the temple being restored was, again, that King Cyrus had given that decree. Israel was now allowed to go back to the promised land that God had promised them. So they're probably thinking, wow, okay, this was really awful, but you know what? It's behind us. We had 7 years of exile. We got humbled. We got our teeth kicked in. Life's going to get better now, right? You couldn't have been more wrong. So they get over into Israel, and tell me if this sounds familiar. There was already a people that were living there in the absence. Because again, a lot of times when you had empires, whether it was Assyria who took over the northern kingdom, or Babylon who took over the southern kingdom, they often would take people from other places and put it into the newly conquered areas. So that area would be kind of calm, and then they would kind of bring the other people to be displaced. So that way that person wasn't as comfortable, and they would be kind of broken and hopefully just adhere to the rules of the empire. So the Israelites get there and they go, okay, all right, we got a 7-year hiatus. Let's start building this temple. We got the promise of Cyrus behind us. We have a financial backing. This is looking pretty good. So the Samaritans, the people living in that area at the time, they went to Israel and said, hey, we want to help out. Israel's like, no, we don't want anything to do with you. We got this. You just kind of go back to your life. Well, they didn't really take that rejection too kindly. I also wonder if they wanted to get involved because they wanted to keep an eye on Israel to see, is Israel going to try to take over again? What's going on here? Well, from that point forward, their main goal, and they were faithful with it, was to frustrate the plans of the Israelites. They bribed officials. They spread lies. Well, actually, I should say lies. The correct history of the rebellious nation of Israel. But they tried to do a smear campaign, to them. And they bided their time. King Cyrus eventually died. The next king that kind of took over, there's a lot of controversy over the next king. Supposedly someone actually impersonated him for about 7 months. His kingship didn't last very long. And then King Darius came into power. The temple had basically already been shut down. It was no longer really being built. The people of Canaan, they got their way. The Israelites were really kind of a little bit distraught. Well, God sent Haggai and Zechariah, and they were amazing prophets, short books. Predominantly, they were in that era. They were physically located in Israel, and they gave prophecy. They were here to teach the people. Well, they went along with people, and they had said, God's going to get this done. We are going to get this temple built, and we got to make sure that we keep on point. How can we keep going about our lives while God's house is in ruin? It's actually some incredibly powerful passages in the prophets of Haggai and Zechariah. So they went to the governor, of that area, Tananina. I'm pretty sure I said that wrong, but we're going to go with it. And he listened to the claims of Israel. Because they said, hey, listen, we're not just building this to build this. King Cyrus said this was okay. That this was a good thing for us to be doing. And we even there's a letter that proves it. So he's like, oh, okay, all right, I hear you. So he went and actually formalized a letter to King Darius and said, these people over here in Israel, they're saying that they have permission. Can you look into this for us? We want to make sure that this is supposed to happen, that it actually happens. King Darius sent an actual messenger out and said, okay, let's find the scroll, if it exists, that says this. Now, too bad they didn't have cloud storage where they could have easily just typed in a search engine and gone, okay, King Cyrus letter. All right, 5 seconds later, yep, absolutely. It was on my OneDrive. I'm going to email it to you now. Yeah, they're good to go. Didn't work that way. They had to scour the land, the archives of Babylon. They eventually found the scroll, that said it. And when King Darius read the message that King Cyrus wrote, I bet this whole process was actually just puzzling, to him. But it was very clear in this letter, the promise that Cyrus had proclaimed. But Darius had a little bit of a moral dilemma. Didn't really show up in the Bible, but just like anyone, this guy's got full power. He sees what the truth is, but he could have ignored it. He could have said, nah, it doesn't really say that. He could have destroyed the scroll. He could have said, we never found anything. He didn't do that. He sees it. He saw the promise. He was faithful to that. He immediately issued his own decree, which the verse that Marcia had read was the very tail end of his decree. He basically reiterated everything that Cyrus had spoken. And what is amazing is he's saying, this temple is going to be resumed. The royal treasury is going to pay for it. And again, the articles that were taken from the temple are going to be restored. The ones that Nebuchadnezzar took. And he said, and to add to that, no one is to interfere. And that's actually what you're seeing. And when he said, no one better interfere, he laid it out what he's going to do to you. I mean, think about this right here. So you decide to try to mess with the temple, they're going to go into your house, take a beam from your house, and impale you on it. Now, I don't know about you, does not sound like a fun day for myself. You're being impaled in front of probably your own house, and then they decide, you know what, we're going to rearrange, we're going to redecorate your house. We're going to turn your house into rubble. Which I wonder if it was symbolic, because the temple was in rubble. So why should you have your home when you're trying to prevent this new home from being built. I mean, it is quite an elaborate punishment. And that really shows you that King Darius, he mean business. He didn't just half-heartedly follow and say, all right, yeah, I'm caught. Yeah, King Cyrus, he made this decree, so I guess we got to follow that. Yeah, allow them to build. But we're not going to really fund it. We're not going to really provide protections or anything like that. Just, have at it, Israel. You have my blessing. No. He threw the full support of the Persian Empire behind that. He went all in on something that he never promised. King Cyrus made the promise, not King Darius. But King Darius said, this is the right thing. We're going to do this. That is being faithful. But just like Cyrus, don't think that King Darius was this amazing, perfect person. He wasn't. He was a human like you and me. He was broken. He was imperfect. Yet in this one area, in this one time, he knocked it out of the park. He showed true faithfulness, yet being a pagan king. So if you feel a little bit bad yourself, just like hopefully last week you felt a little twinge inside yourself at how great of a concept that Cyrus was about being a restorer, hopefully you feel a little bit on how faithful Darius is and how unfaithful you are. But don't worry, we're not going to stay in a negative place. And one of the things I want you to keep in mind is that while all this is going on, it wasn't just like the Persian Empire was like, yeah, King Darius, this is awesome. Yeah, let's let the Israelites do this. Let's fund it even. There was a lot of opposition. There were a lot of people who did not want to see this happen. And yet, he ignored all of the noise of how rebellious they are, that this is not right. These people are going to try to take over. And they stuck with it, too. I want you to understand that. They didn't just stop with King Darius. They continued through. This whole restoration of Jerusalem took well over 100 years. It was a long time period. In fact, that the temple took, probably like 30 plus years for it to actually be, rebuilt. And yet, despite all of that opposition, he remained faithful to the promise. He stuck with it and went all in. And when you're really thinking about it, that trait, faithfulness, isn't just something that God says is good. It's not just something that God says, I do. It is a core element of what defines God, His faithfulness. And the Bible is, again, this huge announcement of His faithfulness. And just the fact that God is also this restorer, it gives us this example that makes it easier to be faithful. I mean, think about it. Do you want to be faithful to something that is not good? It would be like saying, hey, I'm going to go buy a car. I know of this car lot, this used car dealership. They pretty much are going to guarantee you to sell you a junker. The car is going to probably die within like 2 months of you having it. And yet, you go there anyways. Would you do that? It actually does happen. But no, if you knew about the reports, you would go to the one that has earned your faithfulness to them, that proves they're of worth. Well, that's what God has done time and time again. And it shows that when we're faithful, He restores. He gives us something. And because He restores, it makes us more faithful. They play off of one another. And when you try to restore, be faithful on your own, what happens to you? I mean, look deep into yourself. You fail. When you look deep within yourself, and I recommend, not just today, every day, look deep inside yourself. What do you find? If you don't find a faith in God, you will find a faith in yourself. Again, don't want you to look down upon yourself. I don't want you to look up to yourself. I want you to start looking at Jesus. And think about how Jesus has earned our faithfulness. What's that death on the cross? And it's showing that God is trustworthy in all circumstances, no matter the cost. And there's really no greater example of Jesus and God being faithful, no matter the cost, than the Garden of Gethsemane. Now, this passage is in Matthew 26, 36 to 46. It's a very familiar story. I'm sure we've all read it hundreds and hundreds of times. But I want you to have a new lens looking at it going forward for the purpose of this sermon. I really want you to get into Jesus' head for a moment. A lot of times it's like, okay, well, Jesus is over there, he's in the garden, he's crying out to God. Get into his head. It's what he wants. So you're Jesus. You're the God of the universe, restricted in human form. You are staring death right in your face. You are about to die. And not just like, I'm going to fall asleep and just never wake up, or a quick death. You have potentially a day and a half of extreme torment. You got to hand it to the Romans for being creative. I don't know many capital punishments. I mean, King Darius did a pretty good job for capital punishment. But the Romans really took it up with the flogging and then hanging you on a cross to where you basically get strangled to death by yourself. Asphyxiation. You can no longer breathe because you can no longer hold yourself up. And you suffocate to death. So this is what you have to look forward to. You're God, right? You can do anything that you want. You're actually supposed to become king anyways. Do I really want to go through this process? Die and get raised again? And I'm Jesus, God the Father, who we are one and the same, but he made that promise, not me. But I'm supposed to fulfill it. I'm supposed to be faithful to it. Because what's interesting is the comparison that you have a temple of God that got ripped down, destroyed, and then God said, I'm going to restore it. What did Jesus say? You know what I'm about to say. I will tear down the temple, and I will rebuild it in 3 days. Symbolic beyond comparison. Restoration, faithfulness is all in there. The decision to move forward, to be faithful to the promise that God had made, weighed so heavily on Jesus. He cries out multiple times to God, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet, not as I will, but your will be done. Jesus knew the cost that it would take to save the world, to restore it. But it required absolute all-in faithfulness. You will never be in a position to have unlimited power and decide to literally throw it all aside for those who are so limited and so pathetic, yet invaluable beyond comparison. And that had to have been so much pain for Jesus. And yet, Jesus made a choice in that garden to be faithful to the promise of God and to be a part of the restoration of the world. Just like Darius chose to be faithful to the promise that Cyrus had made to restore the temple of God. I want you to let that truth really set in. Jesus chose to be faithful to God's promises. Darius was faithful to Cyrus's promises. So what does this mean to us? What can we learn from this? We can learn that to be a part of God's restoration, we must first decide to be faithful to his promises. What is amazing is that because Jesus was faithful to the promises of God, he has given us something to trust in, something to grasp, to hold on to. Because again, you do not want to be faithful to the wrong thing. But yet, every day, aren't we? And when you're really faithful to something, what does that do to you and God? Puts them by the wayside. How easily is it done? I know for me, I have made pledges. I have been very faithful to different corporate brands over the years. At one point I hated rollerblades, and then I love rollerblades. And you get me into a conversation, I'll sell you on why you should use rollerblades over roller skates. I have been so faithful to video games and movies, and I'm making sure to complete them always. But where did that leave me? We're faithful to certain types of food or brands of food. Which one is it? McDonald's? Burger King? Is it Taco Bell? Is it Wendy's? Of course, most of us should say, probably none of those. Me personally, Taco Bell. But that's the thing that's so interesting. I'm always trying to find what's the best brand of pizza. And then the answer is, whatever pizza's in front of you, because pizza is awesome. We are faithful to our political affiliation. Republican, Democrat, Independent. We love our political stances. I'm a liberal, I'm a conservative. I'm pro-abortion. I'm anti-abortion. Pro-life. We have all these stances. We are so faithful to them. We're faithful to our denomination. Congregationalist. No, I'm a Baptist. I'm an Episcopalian. I'm a Catholic. Ooh, Catholic, okay. We have all these ways we divide ourselves. I am for the white race. I am for the black race. Some really controversial stuff. But people are faithful to those concepts, and they will willing to die for them. But where does that leave God in all the equation? I'll tell you what. He's not even a part of the equation when you think like that. He's not even a variable that you could substitute in. He's not even there. And that breaks his heart. And yet, the Lord, with being second fiddle, or in some cases, not even on the docket, says, I am still going to bring restoration, and I'm going to be faithful to my promises to you. And it is through this demonstration that you are going to be able to do the same, because you're supposed to act like me. We always were supposed to act like God. We were never supposed to be in this broken state. Why do you think God's trying to restore the world? And what's amazing is the opposition that comes against you, especially when you are trying to get better. You want a good picture of Lucifer in the Old Testament? It's those people, the Canaanites, the Samaritans, that were living in Israel when the Israelites were trying to rebuild the temple, and they just came at them with everything they can. They created new political, human systems to shut down the temple restoration. They lied, they cheated, they stole, they did whatever they could. They manipulated truth. Sound familiar? I wasn't describing today. I was, in fact, talking about Israel. But isn't it interesting? Oh, nothing about humanity or Satan's tactics change. What did those people represent? Accusers. What is one of Satan's main goals and main things he does? You might say corrupt the world. He does. But what he loves to do is stand in a courtroom. You're over there. You're on the defense. He's the prosecutor. God's the judge. And he says, look at this person. They have a rap sheet a mile long. They are sinners. They are rebellious. They are not deserving of this restoration. They should die. Satan is the great accuser in our world. Whenever you really start accusing, you know you're not being faithful to God. When you start getting venom and real hate, you are tapping into Lucifer's energy and not being faithful to the Lord. You're not being faithful to the promises that he loves us all, and he wants to restore us all. Now, while Lucifer is doing his song and act, which I won't lie to you, the guy's had a lot of time to perfect it, and he has. You know what Jesus is doing? He's our defense attorney. Right next to you. It says, everything you said about these people are true. This person does in fact deserve death. But God, judge, I'm going to die. I'll do it. This person gets saved. I'm going to die in that place. Everything's good. God accepts that and says, fine, Jesus, you will die. You human, you may live and enter my kingdom. How many people are faithful to do that? As Jesus says, how many would die for a good person? Maybe some. But what about the wretched? Who would die for them? No one. They get cast aside. And there's no human that can actually put themselves in that good category. We try to, and we try to be faithful to that. And it just ends in our destruction. Satan will do everything he can to prevent you to be faithful to God. He will accuse you. He will batter you. He will deceive you. The thing is, stop listening. I know it's easier said than done. But the first thing to change is the decision to want to change. And no, it's not on you to make the change. It's indicative on God to be faithful in His promise to change us. That's where I think we get a little bit mixed up with our signals. We think when we decide to follow God, then it's on us to carry the load. No. The load, the burden for us is to make the decision, to have the desire to want to follow. It's up to God to then decide to be faithful and to change us, but we have to be willing. Cyrus and Darius, if you think about it, they lost money in this temple restoration. What true benefit did they have to be faithful and to make these kind of promises? They had nothing other than it was the right thing to do. Cyrus heard the voice of God and listened. If a pagan is going to be so great with a promise and another pagan is going to be so faithful to follow that promise, where does that leave us believers? Not in a good place. When it's deciding today to open up and start saying, what am I truly faithful in? Am I faithful to God? Am I faithful to my family? Am I faithful to my job? Not where, well, my family's not that good, and my job's not that good, and my life's not that good, so I don't really care about being a good person. That's very inwardly focused. You know who loves that thought process? Satan. Do you know what God wants you to do? Outwardly. You get restored to help restore. You get the faithfulness to become faithful. It is deciding to walk in faithfulness to God because of how amazing and loving He is. I'm going to say that again. Be faithful to God because of His love, because of His amazingness. Don't just do it because you were raised that way. Don't just do it because you know what? It seems like a good idea. I've tried these things don't work. No. In the same way that you get so excited, for me, like video games or food, or we get really politically charged, or we love our sports teams. Go Patriots! Oh, I hate the Patriots. We have this faithfulness, this dedication to these things. And yet it does not translate into the spiritual world, to the Lord. We so much are so lackluster. And yet the Lord's saying, let me come in. Let me restore you, heal you, and I will teach you faithfulness under all circumstances. And when you get injured, which you will, and when you sin, which you will, I'm going to restore you. Understand, I am faithful in my promises. I keep everyone down to the letter. Can any of us humans say that? No. God can, and He shows it time and time again. Again, Book of Promises. That's what the Bible is. You could also call it the book of fulfilled promises. And there are still some to be fulfilled. And when you're getting that faithfulness with God, it's being like King Darius and going all in. So many of us start out, we're faithful, we're all about God, we're sold out, and then life kicks in. And And the half-heartedness comes in. Well, I've given to God this, and I've done this, and I just need this over here. I need to rest. Which means you're not resting in God. You're resting in your own strength. So you've got to start asking yourself, what faithfulness do I have in me? Are you willing to let God come in? Because His faithfulness, I'm telling you guys, it will redefine your life. His restoration will redefine you. Not in the sense that you just decide to start doing these acts of it. That will happen. But you as a person become a restorer and faithfulness. Not because of your strength, and it's not you, but you become a channel for God to flow through and be that. It becomes who you are. So will you be faithful like Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane? Will you go all in? Will you let this king-sized lesson that King Darius showed us of being faithful, and will you let this become your legacy and be faithful to God the way that He has been to you? Or another way, will you be as loyal to God as He is to you? Let us pray. Dear Lord, we cannot thank you enough for how faithful you are. That it's not just Lucifer offering you persecution, it is also us. In fact, in some ways we're almost worse because Lucifer is defined in his role. But we're not. And we know better, Lord. Especially the believers. We've been given the truth, and yet the truth is not buried deep as a seed in our heart. When you say all it takes is a mustard seed of faith, you are trying to give us a template. You are trying to bury something deep within us that will grow out of us into others. How amazing, how faithful that you stay on point, that you are all in all the time for us, despite the fact that we have not earned it. See, in this story, we're actually those Canaanites. We're the ones trying to stop the restoration. And we're being very faithful to that. Lord, switch us to the other side. Let us be the temple builders. Temple being you. Temple being our body, of which you want to dwell. Help us, Lord, learn how to be loyal the way that you are loyal. Not human loyalty that comes with circumstances and requirements, but just completely unconditional, unmerited, yet all in loving faithfulness to you and to one another, Lord. May this dwell deep in our hearts, dwell deep in us throughout the week as we figure out how you can teach us restoration and teach us to be faithful, which starts with us so that we can help others. And it is your power that does it. Thank you, Lord. You are so worthy of our faithfulness and our loyalty. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. We will now play a video. Feel free to sing along if you feel like it.